member for Moore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, for your invitation. Firstly, may I congratulate you, along with many others, on your re-election to the position of Speaker of this House. At the outset, I must express my appreciation to yourself and the Clerk of the House for all the parliamentary staff for the assistance and guidance they have given myself and as a new member. The introductory and induction sessions are of great value and help, and I thank you and all parliamentary staff for making me feel welcome here. Mr Speaker, fellow members of this Assembly, I feel most humbled yet honoured and privileged to stand here before you today as the Liberal member for Moore. Those of us that sit in this House know full well how much effort and hard work and support that is required by many to be elected to this chamber. So I wish to take just a few moments to acknowledge those most important people whose efforts and commitment resulted in my successful election. I firstly thank the WA division of the Liberal Party for placing their faith and trust in me by endorsing me for the seat of Moore. I am committed to not breaching that faith and trust placed in me. Firstly, I must acknowledge and thank my ever-enduring wife, Joan, who has been my stalwart and steadying advisor for 36 years, without whose wonderful support I would have achieved very little and never have withstood the demands of 23 years in local government, let alone being elected to this parliament. To our four daughters, Sharon, Coralie, Marika and Giselle, to our son-in-laws, Grant, Dan and Danny, thank you for making us the complete family that we are. Your encouragement and support and youthful perspective have helped me enormously, and I thank you. I wish also to thank my three brothers, Stan, Ron and Trevor, and their families for their support and encouragement to step forward and take up this challenge, and in their words, have a go. I'd also like to acknowledge my campaign chairman, David Roberts, who despite a battle with serious health problems of late, did such a wonderful job in organising my campaign. Thank you also to all of my campaign committee and the dozens of volunteers who all worked so hard to get me to this place. I acknowledge also the Liberal Party branches in my electorate for their fantastic support and fundraising efforts. It was an outstanding effort by all of them, and it is now my job to repay your confidence in me. Mr Speaker, I would also like to take just a moment to acknowledge and pay tribute to the Honourable Bill McNee, the previous member for Moore. Bill gave 16 years of dedicated service to the electorate of Moore and to this Parliament. Bill was passionately committed to his electorate, and I look forward to the challenge of earning the respect and regard that people of Moore had for Bill. I thank Bill and his wife Leslie for their service to the electorate of Moore and wish them well in their retirement to the farm, and may the seasons be kind to them. May I take this opportunity, Mr Speaker, to relate briefly a little of my background and the values to which I hold. After the return of my father from war service in 1945 and the terrible disruption of World War II, my parents continued their farming career on a war service land settlement block at Bunteen in the Darwallinu district of the Wheat Belt. Like many of that era, they started with virtually nothing, and with sheer hard work and commitment, they carved their future out of the land, developing their farm. Along with my three brothers, I grew up on this wheat and sheep farm, a time when life compared to today, I'm sure, seemed much simpler, less demanding and stressful, where our communities were built around strong social and family values. For a number of years I farmed in partnership with my parents and brothers at Bunteen and at Jurien Bay. But the 1968-69 drought meant I had to look for work off the farm. And like many in the eastern wheat belt that year, our crops had failed. Crayfishing at Jurien Bay seemed the natural way to go, but just for a year, then back to full-time farming. 30 years later, I decided I'd had enough of the sea and left the fishing industry in 1998. Mr Speaker, after considerable inquiries, I have not found evidence that there has been before either a fisherman or a former fisherman elected to this parliament. But either way, I bring to this parliament my experience and knowledge of the fishing industry. During this time in my career, and my interest being community-based, I had the privilege of serving on the Dandaragan Shire Council for a total of 23 years, 17 as Shire President. And I believe strongly in the value of local government and the role it plays in serving local communities as the government closest to the people. Some changes to local government may be inevitable in the future. I advocate that it is essential that local government actively participates in designing and guiding any change to its structure. Mr. Speaker, like others, my parents set the standard and instilled in me all of the good basic values and principles of life. The principles of contributing, participating in our community, of sharing, helping those less fortunate than others, and to not stand back, but to get in and make things happen. Between them, they taught me to be patient, tolerant, courteous, respectful to my peers and others, to have total commitment to family, even when the going becomes difficult, which can test relationships and resolve. My father was a successful farmer and always had made the most of opportunities as they came along. He was often deemed to be lucky, and his quote in response to people saying he was lucky was, "The earlier I get up and the harder I work, the luckier I become." And I say, Mr. Speaker, luck is spelt labouring under correct knowledge. I have endeavoured to practice all of these principles all of my life. Sadly, my mother and father are not here to share this occasion with me, having passed on many years ago. But my appreciation, love and respect for them continues on. But I do acknowledge my family in the gallery today, Mr. Speaker. It is my view, Mr. Speaker, that many of life's so-called old-fashioned values taught to us in that era have gradually been slipping and eroding away, and in some instances have been lost completely to modern society. I would argue that as a modern society, we are the poorer for that loss. Sadly, the media today is constantly full of events and incidences of assault and riotous behaviour perpetrated by a minority, reflecting those loss of those good old-fashioned values. Mr. Speaker, many people look to this Parliament with expectation for it to recognise the detrimental changes to our social values. Spiralling incidents of anti-social behaviour, increase in crime and violence in our communities needs to be addressed. People anticipate and expect that the Parliament of this state will set a new direction to help return dignity and respect to those in the community that have no knowledge of or participation in or adherence to these essential values. Our communities are crying out for something to be done. Leadership and direction must come from this place so as the broader community can play its role to help us rectify the situation. Mr. Speaker, in 1890 the electorate of Moore was established, and I am privileged to have been elected the 11th member for Moore and proud to have won the seat for the Liberal Party, and I look forward to serving the wonderful people of this great electorate. The electorate has changed in shape considerably since its formation, with the shift of population now being concentrated towards the coastal and southern shires of the electorate. The electorate of Moore is some 26,000 kilometres in area, covering 8 local authorities, consisting of Carnamah, Carew, Moora, Dandaragan, Victoria Plains, Gingin, Chittering and Toojay. A very diverse region, taking in most of the Central Midlands and part of the Avon region. My electorate also has approximately 215 kilometres of pristine coastline, encompassing the Jurien Bay Marine Park, and is home to the world-famous Pinnacles, which attracts 160,000 visitors per year. The main industries in the electorate being agriculture, fishing, mining and tourism, with many small businesses providing support and services across a whole range of these and other emerging industries. New industries such as aquaculture, horticulture, viticulture and silviculture. This diversification is creating employment and broadening the economic base of the electorate. These new industries, coupled with a growing tourism industry, are creating the prospect of a positive future in a number of areas in the electorate. The issue, however, of native title is creating unacceptable delays in residential subdivisions, with development and growth stymied in some of our coastal towns. With no development, real estate prices are being driven to heights beyond the reach of many individuals. Business growth in some towns is stalled, unable to capitalise on potential. The local communities and the state are losing out. For example, there has not been a new residential subdivision in Cervantes for over 8 years, despite the high demand. I propose that action needs to be taken to exclude gazetted town sites in WA from the native title claim process, allowing subdivision to occur with the immediate benefits from growth flowing on to all West Australians. Mr Speaker, in the main, the agricultural areas of the electorate enjoy reasonably reliable rainfall, allowing the region to claim to have some of the most productive agricultural areas of the state. Also, approximately 30% of the state's rock lobster catch is produced from the ocean, which bounds the western side of my electorate. Primary industries, though, Mr Speaker, in general, are currently facing some of the most difficult economic conditions for decades. Spiralling input costs for agriculture and fishing are cutting profit margins razor thin, despite reasonably productive seasons. Diversification and improving farming and fishing techniques are helping counter the cost-price squeeze, but I have to draw to the attention of the members of this House that there is a growing concern and an increasing pessimism amongst my constituents and many other rural people as to what the future holds. People in the agricultural and fishing industries feel threatened and under attack from many quarters, such as the apparent climate change, spiralling input costs, fickle markets, the rising Australian dollar, animal rights activists, and the imposing threat of government legislation and regulations which cut across the capacity of farmers and fishermen to function and operate their businesses in a practical and efficient way. For example, many landowners feel threatened by current and proposed environmental regulations in the form of environmental protection policies, such as the Swan Coastal Plains Wetlands Policy. The imposition on landowners of water source protection areas have the potential to restrict the rights of landowners to diversify their activities and ability to vary their agricultural usage of their land, thus threatening their viability and imposing on them a real loss of benefit both currently and for the future. Mr Speaker, there is no question I, like the overwhelming majority of people, including those who derive their living from the land and the sea, wish to see our environment better managed and protected. I believe, however, there is an undeniable basic right that should be unquestionably recognised and adhered to by all governments. That is the right to own property and enjoy the use and benefit of that property as intended, in a fair and proper manner for the purpose that it was legally identified for. If for the benefit and good of the greater community, there is a requirement for that private property, leases or licences, in part or total, are required for conservation or other purposes or uses that the state deems necessary, then the cost or loss to the property owner should not be at the owner's expense. In most cases, property owners and fishing licence owners' future superannuation is held in the value of that property, and in my view, it is totally immoral and wrong to penalise individuals or people by diminishing the value of their investment without fair and just recompense by the state. In future deliberations, I implore members of this House to give this matter careful consideration. This Parliament should legislate to protect the rights of property owners and enshrine it in our state constitution. Mr Speaker, the single most important issue currently on the minds of rural West Australians is the matter of one vote, one value. Country people are extremely concerned at the ramifications of the introduction of one vote, one value. There is a genuine fear that services and facilities in country areas will suffer as a result of reduction in representation. Its introduction could further exacerbate the country-city divide, which sadly exists. Country people already tell me they feel to a degree like second-class citizens because they have to fight so hard for basic services and facilities which city folk expect and in some cases take for granted. The spirit of country people is currently facing its greatest test of resolve. Whatever we must do, we must not kill the spirit of the bush on which this great state was originally built and from which it continues to prosper by. Mr. Speaker, I am heartened by the recent announcement that one of the government's main focuses in its second term will be on education. In the area of education and training, we have a great opportunity to bring some real positives to our rural areas. We have, including in the region of Moore, there are 5 state high schools and 1 private college, all of which, with additional capital, I believe have the capacity to handle introductory schooling in trade and apprenticeship training for students. I support the concept of giving students the distinct option of choosing a pathway to trade and apprenticeship training or a pathway to university and academic careers. I believe we need to better capitalise on our investment in the infrastructure in our district and senior high schools, and with the move to keep students at school longer, give them more choice in future career options. Investment in this area will bring greater meaning and direction to the life of those students that require it, hopefully resulting in lessening the chance of those few losing their way. The result of increased apprenticeship training will begin to address the shortage of skilled trade persons that we are currently faced with. I also believe very strongly in the introduction of school cadet programs such as police rangers and military cadets. Mr. Speaker, we also need to promote and support projects such as the proposed Science Academy at 2J. For nearly 2 years now, the 2J community and its Chamber of Commerce have thoroughly researched and planned a privately funded Science Academy in their town. The project committee are currently seeking state government support for approval to commence this project. I will be supporting them to the fullest and encouraging the government to give favourable consideration to the proposal. Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford to lose this current opportunity with the availability of private funding. Further deliberation places the project in jeopardy of being lost to WA and being relocated to the eastern states. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the matter of road transport in my electorate. Networks of well-maintained and effective rural roads are the virtual arteries that carry the economic and social well-being of our communities in the country. The road network in my electorate is suffering due to a lack of funding and increased volumes of heavy traffic. Local governments in the electorate of Moore are finding it increasingly more difficult to maintain the standards of their road systems. If we don't significantly increase road funding to rural Western Australia, we will in the future face, I predict, a road funding crisis of proportions not before seen in this state. There are 2 major arterial highways which pass through the electorate, namely the Brand and the Great Northern Highways. At long last, the Commonwealth Government has allocated substantial funding to upgrading the Great Northern Highway, which is long overdue. Mr. Speaker, with the increased oil and mining production along the Brand Highway at Dongra, Eneabba, Cataby and Gingin, traffic numbers continue to noticeably rise, with the dangerous mixture of heavy road trains and increasing caravan and tourism traffic, which is creating a recipe for disaster. Along this section of the highway, between Bibby Road in the north and Gingin in the south, a distance of over 100 kilometres, there is not a single dedicated passing lane, in my opinion, creating one of the most hazardous sections of any highway in the state. And I urge the government to give urgent consideration to addressing this situation and allocate funding to a series of passing lanes on this section of the highway. One of the most talked about new roads of recent times, and a project that I have fought for 25 years, is the remaining section of Indian Ocean Drive between Lancelin and Cervantes, a distance of some 68 kilometres. Mr Speaker, I remain astounded that the decision to begin construction continues to appear to be pushed further out, despite the apparent bipartisan support for this road. And in fact, independent research indicates that upon completion, the revenue return to the state this road would generate nearly recovers the construction cost over a 10-year period. This road would bring many millions of dollars of investment to the Central Coast region, creating education improvements, jobs for our youth, and better medical and services and facilities for our aged in the region, but to name but a few benefits. The economic flow-on effect to the state would be significant. Additionally, the natural environment in that vicinity would be a beneficiary. Currently, there is virtually uninhibited and uncontrolled access to many sections of the coast via a myriad of tracks. I continue to seek the government's support in bringing forward the early commencement of this urgently needed road, which in addition would ease the pressure of tourist traffic on the Brand Highway. Another priority road project is the 2J bypass. The current situation is untenable and highly dangerous, with all heavy traffic passing through the centre of the town on a narrow road that was never designed to carry heavy truck configurations. I call on the government to include construction of the bypass in this year's budget estimates. With the planned establishment of the new sale yards at Mouchet coming on stream in the near future, there will be the addition of numerous stock trucks added to the current cavalcade of trucks through the main street without the alternative of a bypass route. Along with the 2J community and others, I am keen to see the detailed planning for the east-west road access via 2J to the proposed Mouchet sale yards. Mr Speaker, I draw to the attention of the House a matter in a proposal for which I hope I will receive total support of this House. It is an issue which eventually, in one way or another, touches or affects almost every single one of us, either through family or through friends. Mr Speaker, I speak of the scourge of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Currently in Western Australia, there are over 17,000 people suffering with dementia. Australia-wide, there are 160,000 people who suffer from Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. Dementia is the second biggest cause of disability in Australia, and it is estimated that by 2016, dementia will be the major cause of disability in this nation. Unless a cure can be found for this disease, research figures indicate that by 2040, 500,000 Australians will suffer from dementia. This will cost us as a nation about 5% of our GDP, or nearly $85 billion in today's value. Not only will the economic cost potentially cripple us as a nation, but the social cost will be devastating. But there is hope, Mr Speaker, and in true West Australian fashion, we have some champions to the cause. At Hollywood Hospital, there is a small team of researchers led by Professor Ralph Martins, who is a world-renowned leader on research into Alzheimer's disease. Professor Martins and his team have recently made major breakthroughs in defining the causes of this debilitating disease. Currently, and historically, I am told, very little government funding goes to assist this research. Of all the achievements attained so far, all of the achievements attained so far would not have been at all possible had it not been for the dedication and commitment of wonderful people that support the McCusker Foundation for Alzheimer's Disease and Research. led foremostly by Mr Malcolm McCusker QC as the patron of the foundation. The generosity of the McCusker family has been outstanding, and I take this opportunity to applaud that generosity and the generosity of many others to this most worthy cause. However, Mr Speaker, what is required now to retain Professor Martin's research team and push on to find the cure for this disease is to bring together government, industry and the public in a collaborative effort to raise substantial funding required to achieve the goal. Mr Speaker, I propose that the Government of Western Australia, with the full support of this Parliament, contribute generously in partnership with the corporate sector and the general public to establish a centre of excellence in Alzheimer's disease and care. The aim would be to develop a treatment and cure for Alzheimer's disease within 10 years. I will be endeavouring to seek the support of the corporate sector in the ensuing months. I look forward to the support of fellow members of this chamber to progress this proposal, which has great merit and should not know the political divide. Mr Speaker, I wish to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his vote of confidence in me by allocating the shadow portfolio of Planning and Wheatbelt to me. I am honoured to have been offered this position and I look forward to the challenging task ahead. In conclusion, Mr Speaker, I again thank you for the opportunity to address this House. I look forward to my time in Parliament. I pledge my commitment to serving the people of Moore to the best of my ability and contribute to the good governance of this state. I hope that the experience that I will bring will add to the quality of debate and the balance and fairness of outcomes, and I thank you.